Dear students, in our previous class we have seen the eukaryotic cell and also prokaryotic cell. The cell organelles, some difference between plant cell and animal cell also we have seen. Now let us study the cell membrane. The detailed structure of the cell membrane was studied only after the invention of electron microscope, that is after 1950. Meanwhile, the chemical studies on the cell membrane also carried out, especially the human RBCs studied. It helped us to know the structure of plasma membrane. Means the chemical nature or the structure of cell membrane. The cell membrane, as we know, is the outermost layer in the animal cell, and it is present next to the cellulose cell wall in plant cells. The cell membrane is made up of lipids or composed of lipids. Lipids are arranged in bilayer. The electron microscopic studies have clearly shown that the cell membrane is made up of lipids. That is, cell membrane is chemically made up of lipids. How these lipids are arranged in the cell membrane? Now you may refer the diagram. See the diagram. The lipids are arranged in bilayer. Bilayer means they are in two layers. The lipids or lipid molecules have polar end or polar heads which are arranged outer side. Towards the inner side, non-polar end is present. It is hydrophobic in nature. You know, hydrophobic? Hydro means water. Phobic means hating. The hydrophobic ends are present towards the inner side. Now, once again, see the diagram. Look at the diagram. Now, I will show you the diagram. You can see the blue colored one, which is the lipid layer. You carefully examine, it is present in two layers. That's why we call bilayer lipids. And you carefully examine towards outer side, there is polar end. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ spherical shape ಇದೆ ನೋಡಿ. That is actually the polar end. Polar end. Towards the inner side, you can see non-polar end. Okay. So I told you the lipids are arranged in bilayer with polar ends or heads outer side and non-polar tails, that is hydrophobic end towards the inner side. The non-polar tail of saturated hydrocarbons is protected from aqueous environment. See the diagram. The lipid membrane mainly consists of what? Phosphoglycerides. A very important notable point for NEET or CET examination. The lipid membrane is composed or made up of phosphoglycerides. Okay. Phosphoglyceride word is very, very important word. Biochemically, the cell membrane contains protein and carbohydrate. Once again, just look at the diagram for protein and carbohydrate. I will show you the diagram. See the protein and carbohydrate. Carbohydrate means sugar ಅಂತಲ್ಲಿ ಲೇಬಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. See the diagram. In addition to bilayer lipid layer, we come across the protein and the carbohydrate or the sugar. Clearly visible. Okay. the ratio of protein and lipids varies. In different cells. In human erythrocyte, cell possess 52% of protein and only 40% of lipids. It's also very important for CET or NEET examination. So what is the percentage of protein and lipids? Protein is 52% in the cell membrane and the lipid is only 40%. Okay. Next, we know that there are protein in the cell membrane. The proteins which are present in the cell membrane are classified into two types. Integral proteins and peripheral proteins. How many types of proteins are there? Integral proteins and peripheral proteins. Sometimes we call intrinsic and extrinsic proteins. The integral proteins are partially or totally buried in the membrane. See the diagram once again. If we examine the proteins, some of the proteins are completely buried in the membrane. ಪೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗಿ ಸೆಲ್ ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇದೆ. Some of them, they are partially. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮೆಂಬ್ರೇನ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇದೆ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಇದೆ. Other types also there. Some of them are peripheral. Peripheral means remain outside. How the proteins are arranged? The proteins are of two types, integral and peripheral proteins. How they are arranged? Integral proteins may be partially or totally buried in this membrane. Partially ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಪ್ರೋಟೀನ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಲಿಪಿಡ್ ಲೇಯರ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿದೆ, ಇನ್ನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಪಾರ್ಟು ಔಟ್ಸೈಡ್ ಇದೆ. Totally means some of them completely in the lipid layers. Two types ಆಯಿತು. Some more proteins are also there. These proteins, they remain outside. Okay. Now the very important point. See the diagram once again. The arrangement of proteins in the layer, cell membrane. Okay. Then, in the beginning, I told you the detailed structure of cell membrane was studied just because of the invention of electron microscope. Okay. In order to explain the structure of plasma membrane, many models have been proposed by the scientist. It was in the year 1972. A model was proposed to explain the structure of membrane. This model, now popularly called fluid mosaic model. Who proposed this model? The fluid mosaic model was proposed by Singer and Nicholson in the year 1972. This fluid mosaic model is accepted model for the plasma membrane. According to this, the plasma membrane is quasi-fluid in nature. Of lipids, it enables in the lateral movement of proteins with the bilayer. Now, if we examine the diagram, it looks like a mosaic nature because of the proteins. ಕೆಲವು ಪ್ರೋಟೀನ್ಸು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ಲಿ ಮುಳುಗಿದಾವೆ, ಕೆಲವು ಅರ್ಧ ಮುಳುಗಿದಾವೆ, ಕೆಲವು ತುಂಬ ಹೊರಗಡೆನೇ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ ಲಿಪಿಡ್ ಲೇಯರ್ ಇಂದ. Because of this reason, it looks like mosaic. Hence the name fluid mosaic model of plasma membrane. This model also called Singer and Nicholson model. Okay. According to this plasma membrane, I told you already is a quasi-fluid in nature. Because of this nature of lipid enable in the lateral movement of proteins within the overall bilayer. A very important point. This ability to move within the membrane is measured as its fluidity. The fluidity means the function which helps in the plasma membrane helps in cell growth, secretion, endocytosis, cell division, and formation of intercellular junctions, etc. Okay. So that's all about fluid mosaic model of Singer and Nicholson. It's a widely accepted model to explain the structure of cell membrane. Okay, now let us see the functions. The function very important. The function of cell membrane is transportation. It will transport the molecules across the membrane. This membrane is a living membrane and it is selectively permeable membrane. Selectively permeable membrane means the membrane allows only certain molecules to pass through it. That is what we call selectively permeable. Other membranes can't pass. Other molecules. The molecules can move from one region to other region without the expenditure of energy. This we call passive transport. How the neutral solutes move? Let us see. The neutral solutes moves through the membrane by simple diffusion. Simple diffusion means the molecules move from higher concentration towards lower concentration. That is, develop concentration gradient. Okay. The water also moves. Next function. The water moves through the membrane. The movement of water takes place by diffusion. Through the selectively permeable membrane from higher concentration towards lower concentration. This process we call osmosis. Osmosis means the movement of water molecules from higher concentration towards lower concentration through the semi-permeable membrane. Okay. So water is more outside environment, water is less in the cell. So water moves into the cell by diffusion. Some molecules are there. They are the polar molecules. If the molecules are polar, they can't pass through the non-polar lipid bilayer, which require energy. Okay. Which require some carrier molecules. The carrier molecules are the proteins. Proteins act as carrier molecule, which facilitate the transport through the membrane. ಇದು ಯಾವ ಥರ ಅಂದರೆ, ಒಬ್ಬ ಕುಂಟ ಇರ್ತಾನೆ, ಒಂದು ನದಿ ಬಂದರೆ ಅವನು ದಾಟ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಒಬ್ಬರು ಸಹಾಯದಿಂದ ದಾಟ್ತಾನೆ. ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡರೇ ಕ್ಯಾರಿಯರ್ ಪ್ರೋಟೀನ್. So this is how the polar molecules pass from one end to the other end. What about the ions or the molecules which transport against the concentration gradient? Some of the molecules transport against the concentration gradient. Concentration gradient means from lower to higher concentration, which require energy. This is what we call active transport. ಇದು ಯಾವ ಥರ ಅಂದರೆ, ನಾವು ಸೈಕಲ್ನ ತುಳಿತಾ ಇರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಸೈಕಲ್ ಅಪ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಸೈಕಲನ್ನು ತುಳಿಬೇಕು, ನಾವು ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಕ್ಲೈಂಬ್ with the expenditure of the energy. This is actually we call active transport. ಅದೇ ಒಂದು ಅಪ್ಪನ್ನು ಡೌನ್ಗೆ ಇಳಿಬೇಕು ಅಂದಾಗ ಸೈಕಲ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಕುತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಸಾಕು, ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ಡೌನ್ಗೆ. ವಿತೌಟ್ ದಿ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಂಡಿಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಎನರ್ಜಿ ಮಾಲಿಕ್ಯೂಲ್ಸ್ ಮೂವ್ಸ್. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ವಿ ಕಾಲ್ ಪ್ಯಾಸಿವ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟ್. If the molecules move with energy, active transport. Passively, it is what we call passive transport. Okay. So sodium, potassium transport with energy, called the active transport. I told you. Function of cell membrane also important. Okay. Cell wall. So next we shall study the cell wall. The cell wall is a non-living rigid structure in a cell is called cell wall. What is the difference between cell wall and plasma membrane? Plasma membrane is a living membrane. Okay. Cell wall is non-living layer. The cell wall is present outside the plant cell. It forms the outermost layer in the plant cell. The cell wall is absent in the animal cell. But the presence of cell wall is the most important characteristic feature of plant cell. This cell wall is actually made up of cellulose. That is, primary wall is made up of cellulose, in which the basic unit, glucose, a very important point for CETR NEET examination. Okay, so if we examine the young cells have only the primary cell wall. The primary cell wall is made up of only cellulose, chemical, which is capable of growth. But if we examine the old cells on the primary cell wall, secondary wall laid down, Sometimes even tertiary wall layer is also formed. ಇದು ಯಾವ ಥರ ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಮನೆ ಕಟ್ಟಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಗೋಡೆ ಕಟ್ಟಿರ್ತೀವಿ, ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ವಾಲ್. ಒಂದು ಸತ್ತೆ ಲಪ್ಪ ಅಂತ ಹಾಕಿದರೆ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ವಾಲ್. ಬಣ್ಣ ಹಾಕಿದಾಗ ಟರ್ಷಿಯರಿ ವಾಲ್. ಈ ಥರ ಸೆಲ್ ವಾಲು 3 ಲೇಯರ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಸೆಲ್ ವಾಲ್, ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಸೆಲ್ ವಾಲ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಟರ್ಷಿಯರಿ ಸೆಲ್ ವಾಲ್. The chemical nature also varies. Primary wall is made up of only cellulose. Okay. Next, the two adjacent cells are separated by what is known as the middle lamella. The two neighboring cells are separated by the middle lamella. The middle lamella is made up of what is known as calcium pectate or pectinate. So, which holds the two neighboring cells. ಎರಡು ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಲು ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು, that is calcium pectinate. It is nothing but the middle lamella. Okay. The two adjacent cells, especially the young cells, are interconnected by cytoplasmic bridge. This bridge we call plasmodesmata. What is plasmodesmata? Question ಕೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. The cytoplasmic bridge between two neighboring cells is called plasmodesmata. Okay. Now let us study few points regarding the function of cell wall. Okay. The cell wall, being the outermost layer, it protects the cell protection from infection and also from mechanical damage. What is function? Protection. Not only protection, it prevents the cell from infection. Infection means the bacteria, fungi, etc. Not only that one, even it gives mechanical damage. The cell wall, it helps in cell-to-cell interaction and act as barrier to undesirable macromolecules. Because of this, the molecules move from one cell to another cell. Okay. One is protection. Okay. Next. If you examine the algal cells, algal cell wall is made up of cellulose. In addition to that, galactons, mannans, and even minerals of calcium carbonate is present. Okay. ಸೊ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಬಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೊಟೆಕ್ಷನ್ from infections and also gives mechanical support. If we examine the algal cells, the algal cell wall is made up of cellulose, galactons, mannans, and minerals, some minerals. Sometimes calcium carbonate also. Okay. The algal cell, if you examine, the algal cell wall is made up of cellulose, galactons, mannans, and minerals like calcium carbonate. Okay. So that's all about plasmodesmata cell wall. Okay.